Hello everyone, my name is Sofia, and I'm 32 years old. I'm here today to share a story from my life that forever changed how I view community and belonging. A story that unfolded right here in the vibrant city of Guadalajara, Mexico. It's a tale of assumptions, prejudice, and a surprising revelation that left many speechless. I had always dreamed of living in a place where tradition and modernity intertwined, and Guadalajara, with its rich culture and bustling energy, seemed like the perfect fit. I moved into a quaint, older house in a well-established neighborhood, hoping to find a sense of home and connection. My new street, lined with colorful colonial houses and blooming jacarandas, felt incredibly welcoming at first glance. I remember the excitement of unpacking, arranging my small collection of books, and painting the kitchen a cheerful shade of yellow. Every morning, I would step out onto my small patio, breathing in the scent of fresh pan dulce from the nearby bakery and the distant sounds of mariachi music. It was a dream come true, or so I thought. My appearance, however, seemed to set me apart from the moment I arrived. I have dark skin, a legacy of my Afro-Mexican heritage, which is not as common in this particular part of Guadalajara. I quickly noticed the lingering glances, the quick shifts in conversation when I approached, and the polite but distant smiles. I tried to be friendly, offering greetings to neighbors tending their gardens or walking their dogs. Most would offer a curt nod in return, or sometimes no acknowledgement at all. It felt like I was an invisible presence, a shadow moving through their otherwise bright and busy lives. I attributed it to being new, a natural caution people have towards strangers. I told myself that over time, as they got to know me, things would change. I hoped my quiet demeanor and respectful attitude would eventually break down any initial barriers. But the subtle ostracization continued. When I walked past groups of neighbors chatting on their porches, their conversations would often cease, only to resume once I was out of earshot. Invitations to local events, like block parties or communal dinners, never seemed to reach my mailbox. It was a strange feeling, being surrounded by people yet feeling utterly isolated. I wasn't just a new neighbor. I was the new neighbor, whispered about, observed from a distance, and subtly excluded from the fabric of daily life. The warmth I had initially felt for the neighborhood began to cool, replaced by a growing sense of unease. I started to notice how my modest car, an older model that served me perfectly well, contrasted with the newer, shinier vehicles parked along the street. My simple, comfortable clothes seemed out of place next to the more polished attire of some residents. These small details, I realized, were being judged. The unspoken message was clear: I didn't quite fit in. I wasn't like them. The assumptions were palpable, hanging in the air like an unspoken rule. It was a silent form of discrimination, more insidious because it was never overtly stated, only subtly enacted. I tried to ignore it, to focus on my work and my personal life, but the constant feeling of being an outsider began to wear on me. Every polite nod that felt like a dismissal, every averted gaze, chipped away at my initial optimism. I started to question if I had made the right choice moving here. Despite the growing discomfort, I held on to a sliver of hope. I believed that deep down, people were good, and perhaps they just needed a reason to see beyond their preconceived notions. I was determined not to let their assumptions define my experience. This determination was tested daily, but I refused to retreat into myself completely. I continued my routine, always with a polite smile, even if it wasn't reciprocated. I believed in the power of quiet persistence, hoping that one day, my presence would simply be accepted without question. Little did I know, a pivotal moment was approaching, one that would force the neighborhood to confront its biases head-on. A meeting was called, an event that would bring all these unspoken tensions to the surface and ultimately lead to a revelation no one saw coming. This meeting, ostensibly about community improvements, would become the stage for a dramatic shift in perception. It was the moment where being ignored would turn into an undeniable spotlight, and where my true purpose in this neighborhood would finally be revealed. My attempts to integrate into the community continued, despite the persistent coldness I encountered. I tried attending local events, like the weekly market in the main plaza, hoping to strike up conversations with vendors and fellow shoppers. I would linger, admiring the crafts and fresh produce, but always felt an invisible wall between myself and the other residents. I'd offer a friendly "buenos dias" to the women selling tortillas, but their responses were often brief, their eyes quickly darting away. It was a stark contrast to the easy camaraderie I saw them share with other customers, a clear sign that I was not yet, or perhaps never would be, part of their inner circle. The local cafe, a popular spot for morning coffee and gossip, was another place where I felt profoundly unseen. I would sit alone with my book in a café de olla, observing the lively chatter around me. People would laugh, share stories, and greet each other warmly, but their gazes would slide right past me as if I were part of the furniture. It was a strange form of social invisibility where my physical presence was acknowledged, but my personhood was not. I wasn't just ignored, I was actively overlooked, as if my existence posed an inconvenience or a question they preferred not to address. This constant feeling of being dismissed started to weigh heavily on my spirit. I began to question if it was something I was doing wrong, despite knowing deep down that my intentions were always good. Was my Spanish not fluent enough? Was my smile not warm enough? I scrutinized every interaction, searching for a reason, but always came back to the same unsettling conclusion. It wasn't about what I did, but who I was. The internal monologue became a constant companion. They think I'm poor, I would tell myself, or that I don't belong here. It was a painful realization that my identity, specifically my race and perceived economic status, was forming the basis of their judgment. One afternoon, I saw a group of children playing soccer in the park, and for a moment, I felt a pang of longing for the simple joy of connection. I smiled at a little girl who retrieved her ball near my bench, but her mother quickly called her away, pulling her close with a wary glance in my direction. It was a small incident, but it stung deeply. I tried to rationalize it, to tell myself that perhaps they were just private people, or that the neighborhood was simply slow to accept newcomers. But the pattern was too consistent, too widespread, to be anything but intentional. The polite smiles were masks for something else. The community garden, a beautiful patch of green that everyone contributed to, was another arena for this subtle exclusion. I offered to help water the plants one morning, only to be told, quite curtly, that everything was handled. Yet, moments later, I saw another neighbor happily joining the watering rotation. It was a constant barrage of microaggressions, small slights that individually might seem insignificant, but collectively created a heavy burden. They chipped away at my confidence, making me question my place and my worth in this new environment. Despite the emotional toll, I refused to let their prejudices define me. I reminded myself of my purpose, of the reason I had chosen this particular neighborhood, and of the work I was quietly undertaking behind the unassuming facade of my home. I knew that true worth wasn't measured by the approval of others, especially those who judged based on superficialities. My resilience was being tested, but it was also being strengthened by every dismissive glance and every unspoken slight. The feeling of being unheard was particularly frustrating. I had ideas, experiences, and a genuine desire to contribute positively to this community. Yet, I knew that if I spoke, my words would likely fall on deaf ears, dismissed before they were even fully articulated. This quiet struggle fueled a growing resolve within me. I knew that one day, the truth of who I was and what I was capable of would inevitably come to light. And when it did, it would not be through my words, but through my actions. The upcoming neighborhood meeting, a seemingly mundane gathering, would provide the perfect stage for this quiet revolution. It was an opportunity, I realized, to finally break through the wall of prejudice, not by force, but by the sheer weight of undeniable truth. One crisp Tuesday morning, a flyer appeared on my door, tucked neatly under the welcome mat. It was an official notice for the quarterly Neighborhood Association meeting scheduled for the following Saturday at the community center. The topic, future developments and community security initiatives. My heart gave a little flutter. This was it, I thought. A formal setting, a chance to finally be heard, to contribute to the discussions that directly impacted my new home. I had been waiting for an opportunity like this, a structured environment where I could potentially break through the casual social barriers. The flyer detailed several key agenda points, including a proposed renovation of the Central Park and the implementation of new security cameras. These were issues I cared deeply about having spent many evenings walking through the park and observing the need for better lighting and maintenance. I decided then and there that I would attend. This wasn't just about fitting in, it was about being an active participant in the place I now called home. I felt a mix of nervousness and determination, knowing that this could be a turning point or another disheartening experience. In the days leading up to the meeting, I prepared diligently. I researched local crime statistics, looked up best practices for park renovations in similar communities, and even drafted a few points I wanted to make. I wanted to be informed, articulate, and ready to engage meaningfully. My preparation was also a way to steel myself against the inevitable coldness I expected. I knew that simply showing up wouldn't guarantee acceptance, but I hoped that my genuine interest and preparedness would at least earn me a modicum of respect. As Saturday approached, I noticed more flyers appearing on other doors, and I overheard snippets of conversation about the meeting from neighbors. Their tones were often casual, sometimes even dismissive, as if it were just another routine obligation. For me, it felt like a crucial test. The morning of the meeting, I chose my outfit carefully, simple, professional, and unassuming. I wanted to project competence and seriousness, not wealth or flashiness. My goal was to be seen as a thoughtful resident, not just the new black neighbor. As I walked towards the community center, I saw other neighbors heading in the same direction, some in pairs, others in small groups. They greeted each other with warm smiles and lively chatter, a stark contrast to the silence I usually experienced. I kept my gaze forward, a quiet resolve settling in my chest. A few people glanced my way as I approached the entrance, their expressions shifting from casual conversation to a flicker of surprise, then quickly back to indifference. It was the familiar pattern, a silent acknowledgement of my presence, followed by an immediate dismissal. I took a deep breath, reminding myself of my purpose. This was not about them accepting me on their terms. It was about me asserting my right to be part of this community. I had a voice, and I intended to use it, even if it felt like shouting into the wind. The community center was a modest building, usually used for dance classes or local gatherings. Today, it was set up with rows of chairs facing a small podium and a projector screen displaying the meeting agenda. The air buzzed with low conversations. I found an empty seat towards the back, hoping to observe before engaging. As I settled in, I noticed a few more curious glances, quickly averted. It was clear I was an unexpected attendee, and my presence was causing a subtle ripple of discomfort. Despite the quiet tension, I felt a strange sense of empowerment. I was here. I had shown up. And for the first time, I felt like I was taking a tangible step towards breaking down the invisible barriers that had surrounded me since my arrival. The meeting was about to begin, and I braced myself for what was to come. I knew it wouldn't be easy, but I was ready to face whatever subtle slights or overt dismissals came my way. My resolve was stronger than their prejudice. The meeting began promptly at 10, with Mr. Ramirez, the long-standing Neighborhood Association president, tapping the microphone. The room, filled with familiar faces, settled into a quiet hum. I sat in my seat, observing, feeling like an anthropologist studying a foreign tribe. As Mr. Ramirez went through the opening remarks, I noticed the easy rapport he shared with many in the audience. He made eye contact, cracked small jokes, and seemed to know everyone by name. When his gaze swept over my section, it passed right through me, as if I were invisible. The first agenda item was the proposed park renovation. Several residents raised their hands, eager to voice their opinions. They spoke passionately about the need for better lighting, new playground equipment, and improved landscaping. I listened intently, finding myself agreeing with many of their points. When there was a lull in the discussion, I tentatively raised my hand, hoping to contribute a point about sustainable materials for the new playground. Mr. Ramirez paused, his eyes scanning the room, seemingly looking past me, before calling on someone else further down the row. A wave of frustration washed over me, but I quickly suppressed it. I told myself it was just an oversight, that he hadn't seen me. I waited for another opportunity, keeping my hand slightly raised, trying to catch his eye. The discussion moved on to community security. A few residents expressed concerns about petty theft and suggested installing more cameras. I had done extensive research on this topic, having worked on similar urban planning projects in my previous life, and felt I could offer valuable insights. I raised my hand again, this time more assertively. Mr. Ramirez looked directly at me for a fleeting second, his brow furrowing slightly, before he turned his attention to a woman in the front row, nodding for her to speak. My hand slowly lowered, a heavy sigh escaping my lips. It was clear. This wasn't an oversight. It was deliberate. I was being actively ignored, my presence dismissed, my voice silenced before I even had a chance to speak. The cold shoulder I had felt outside was now amplified within the confines of this room. The other residents seemed to follow suit. When I tried to lean over and whisper a question to the person next to me during a break, they simply turned away, pretending not to hear. It was a collective agreement, an unspoken pact to exclude me. I felt a burning sensation in my chest, a mix of anger and profound sadness. Here I was, trying to engage, to be part of something, and I was being treated as if I had no right to be there, as if my input held no value. One woman, Mrs. Garcia, who lived a few houses down from me, even gave me a dismissive glance when I briefly caught her eye. Her expression seemed to say, "What are you doing here?" It was a look I had become all too familiar with. The meeting continued, and I forced myself to stay, to listen, to absorb every word, even as the feeling of alienation grew stronger. I wouldn't give them the satisfaction of leaving. I would sit there, a silent testament to their prejudice. My mind raced, trying to understand the depth of their bias. Was it just my skin color? My perceived lack of wealth? Or was it a combination of both, a convenient excuse to maintain their insular community? The irony wasn't lost on me. They were discussing community improvements and security, yet they couldn't even extend basic courtesy to a fellow resident. Their vision of community seemed to have very specific, unspoken boundaries. As the meeting neared its end, Mr. Ramirez announced the final agenda item, a special announcement regarding a significant community development project. A hush fell over the room. This was clearly the moment everyone had been waiting for. Mr. Ramirez cleared his throat, a self-important smile playing on his lips. "Now for the exciting news," he began, his voice booming slightly. "As many of you know, our beloved community center is in dire need of a complete overhaul. The roof leaks, the plumbing is outdated, and we desperately need modern facilities." A murmur of agreement rippled through the room. This was a long-standing issue, a dream for many residents, but one that always seemed out of reach due to lack of funding. I had heard whispers about it since I moved in, but never thought it would materialize. "For years," Mr. Ramirez continued, "we've struggled to find the necessary resources. Grants were denied, and local fundraising efforts, while commendable, simply weren't enough. We almost gave up hope." He paused, building the suspense. "However," he announced, his voice rising, "I am thrilled to inform you that we have secured a substantial, anonymous donation that will cover the entire cost of the community center's renovation and modernization. This is a game-changer for our neighborhood." A wave of excited chatter erupted. People started clapping, some even cheering. The atmosphere in the room completely transformed, from polite attention to genuine jubilation. This was truly incredible news for everyone present. "And not only that," Mr. Ramirez added, holding up a hand for silence, "but the generous donor has also committed to funding the new park lighting and security cameras we just discussed. This means our community will be safer and more beautiful than ever before." The applause grew louder, a collective sigh of relief and joy. I watched the faces around me, seeing pure happiness and gratitude. It was a powerful moment, and I felt a quiet satisfaction knowing the impact this would have on their lives. Then, Mr. Ramirez continued, "While the donor wishes to remain largely anonymous, they have agreed to allow me to introduce their representative, who has been working tirelessly behind the scenes to make all of this possible. They are also the visionary behind the new, sustainable design for the community center." He gestured towards the back of the room, towards my section. "Please join me in welcoming the project lead and representative of our generous benefactor." My heart pounded in my chest. This was it. "Miss Sofia Ramirez," he announced, beaming. The room went absolutely silent. Every single head swiveled in my direction, their eyes wide with disbelief, confusion, and then, slowly, dawning realization. I stood up, adjusting my simple blazer, and walked slowly towards the front of the room. The silence was deafening, punctuated only by the occasional gasp. Faces that had previously ignored me were now staring, mouths agape. Mrs. Garcia, who had given me the dismissive glance earlier, looked as if she had seen a ghost. Her eyes, wide with shock, followed my every step. Mr. Sanchez, who had cut me off earlier, now looked utterly bewildered. I reached the podium and stood beside Mr. Ramirez, who, despite his initial surprise, quickly regained his composure and offered me a slightly awkward smile. He had known, of course, but the public revelation was still impactful. I looked out at the sea of stunned faces, the people who had judged me, ignored me, and dismissed me as the poor black neighbor. The irony was almost overwhelming. The tension in the room was palpable, a mix of shock and dawning embarrassment. I took a deep breath, letting the silence hang in the air for a moment, allowing the full weight of the revelation to sink in. The expressions on the faces before me ranged from utter disbelief to dawning horror, as if a trick had been played on them. "Good morning, everyone," I began, my voice calm and clear, cutting through the stunned silence. "My name is Sofia. It's a pleasure to finally address you all, not just as a new resident, but as the project lead for your community center's renovation." I could see the gears turning in their minds, connecting the dots. The poor black neighbor they had ignored, the one who didn't belong, was the very person responsible for their long-awaited community dream coming true. The irony was almost comical. Mr. Ramirez, recovering quickly, stepped forward. "Indeed, Miss Sofia has been instrumental in securing the funding and developing the architectural plans for the new center. Her vision for a truly sustainable and inclusive space is truly remarkable." He tried to sound enthusiastic, but his voice held a hint of nervousness. I then began to explain the details of the project, speaking about the new energy-efficient design, the expanded multi-purpose rooms, and the accessible features for all residents. I spoke with passion and expertise, detailing every aspect of the transformation. As I spoke, I watched their faces. The initial shock slowly morphed into a mixture of awe and profound embarrassment. They saw not a poor neighbor, but a competent, knowledgeable professional, someone with the power to bring their dreams to fruition. I presented the architectural renderings on the screen, showcasing a beautiful, modern building that still retained the charm of Guadalajara's traditional architecture. Gasps of admiration rippled through the room. This was far beyond what they had imagined. "The funding," I continued, "comes from a foundation I established several years ago, dedicated to investing in underserved communities and promoting sustainable urban development. Guadalajara, and specifically this neighborhood, holds a special place in my heart. This was the final blow. It wasn't just a donation, it was my foundation. The poor neighbor was a philanthropist, an architect, a developer, and a woman of significant means who had chosen to live simply and observe them. The room was buzzing now, but it was a different kind of buzz, a mix of whispers, apologies, and stunned realization. People who had avoided my gaze earlier now couldn't stop staring, their eyes wide with a mixture of shame and newfound respect. I concluded my presentation, then opened the floor for questions, not about the project, but about my identity. A woman hesitantly raised her hand. "Miss Sofia, why didn't you say anything before?" she stammered, her face flushed. I smiled gently. I wanted to understand the community first, to see it for what it truly was, without any preconceived notions influencing my perception. And perhaps, I added, my gaze sweeping across the room, I wanted to see if the community would see me for who I truly was, without any preconceived notions influencing their perception. The silence returned, heavier this time, filled with unspoken regret. The truth had been laid bare, and the comfortable assumptions they had held about me, and perhaps about themselves, were shattered. The meeting, which had started with my invisibility, ended with me being the undeniable center of attention. The poor black neighbor had just revealed herself to be the catalyst for their neighborhood's most significant transformation. The meeting concluded in a flurry of awkward apologies and hesitant approaches. As I stepped down from the podium, several residents, including Mrs. Garcia and Mr. Sanchez, immediately surrounded me, their faces a mixture of shame and forced cordiality. "Miss Sofia, I am so terribly sorry," Mrs. Garcia stammered, her usual confident demeanor completely gone. "We had no idea. We truly misjudged you. Please, forgive our assumptions." Her words felt hollow, but her embarrassment was genuine. Mr. Sanchez, looking down at his shoes, mumbled, "Yes, Miss Sofia, we feel terrible. We thought, well, it doesn't matter what we thought. Your work is incredible. We are so grateful." His voice was barely a whisper. I listened patiently, my expression neutral. I felt no triumph, no desire for revenge, only a quiet resolve to address the elephant in the room. This wasn't just about their apologies. It was about confronting the prejudice that had festered. "Thank you for your apologies," I said, my voice calm but firm. "I appreciate them. However, it's important to acknowledge that my value, or my ability to contribute, should never have been tied to your perception of my wealth or my background." I continued, "For months, I walked among you, a fellow resident, eager to connect and be part of this community. Yet, I was met with silence, averted gazes, and a consistent feeling of being dismissed. My skin color and my modest way of living seemed to be enough for many to decide I didn't belong. A few people shifted uncomfortably, their eyes darting away. Others nodded slowly, a dawning understanding finally replacing their initial shock. It was a difficult truth, but one that needed to be spoken aloud. The pain of being unseen, of having your voice silenced before it's even uttered, is a heavy burden, I explained. It makes one question their worth, their place. But it also strengthens one's resolve to prove that worth, not for others, but for oneself. I looked directly at Mr. Ramirez, who was standing nearby, looking somewhat uncomfortable. "Mr. Ramirez, you saw me raise my hand multiple times today, eager to contribute to discussions about the park and security. Yet, I was overlooked." He visibly winced. I apologize, Miss Sofia. I truly didn't. I was focused on the agenda." His excuse was weak, and we both knew it. The unspoken truth of his bias hung in the air. "My hope," I continued, addressing the entire room, "is that this experience serves as a lesson for all of us. That we learn to look beyond superficialities, beyond assumptions, and truly see the person standing before us. Every individual has something valuable to offer, regardless of their appearance or perceived status." The room remained quiet, a mix of introspection and lingering discomfort. My words weren't accusatory, but they were direct, forcing them to confront their own biases. It was a moment of collective reflection for the entire neighborhood. I then shifted my tone, offering a path forward. The community center project is for everyone. My commitment to this neighborhood is genuine, and it always has been. I believe in the power of unity and the strength that comes from embracing diversity. I spent the next hour speaking with various residents, not just about the project, but about their lives, their concerns, and their hopes for the neighborhood. The conversations were tentative at first, but slowly, genuine connection began to form. It was a long, emotionally draining day, but as I walked home, I felt a profound sense of peace. The invisible wall had finally been shattered, not by anger, but by truth. The poor black neighbor had not only been seen, but had become a catalyst for change. In the weeks and months that followed the neighborhood meeting, the atmosphere in El Barrio transformed dramatically. The initial shock and embarrassment among the residents slowly gave way to genuine respect and, surprisingly, warmth. Suddenly, my greetings were reciprocated with enthusiastic smiles. Neighbors I had never spoken to before would stop me on the street, eager to chat about the community center project or simply to offer a friendly word. Mrs. Garcia even brought me a homemade cake one afternoon, a gesture of sincere apology. The construction on the community center began swiftly, and I was deeply involved in every step. Residents, who had once ignored me, now approached me with ideas, offering their time and skills to help with the renovation. It became a true community effort, driven by a newfound sense of unity. I made sure that the new community center was truly inclusive, designing spaces for all ages and abilities. We held workshops, cultural events, and educational programs, all aimed at bringing the diverse residents of El Barrio closer together. The transformation wasn't just in the physical building, it was in the hearts and minds of the people. The incident at the meeting had forced them to confront their own biases, and many seemed genuinely committed to changing their ways. I saw children of different backgrounds playing together in the newly renovated park, their laughter echoing through the trees. I saw older residents gathering for coffee at the new cafe inside the community center, sharing stories and building new friendships. My own life in El Barrio flourished. I no longer felt like an outsider. I was Sofia, the architect, the philanthropist, the neighbor, who had helped bring their dreams to life. My simple house, once a symbol of my perceived poverty, became a quiet testament to my values. I continued to live modestly, reminding myself that true wealth lies not in possessions, but in purpose and connection. My foundation expanded its reach, but my heart remained rooted in this Guadalajara neighborhood that had taught me so much. Looking back, the pain of being ignored was a necessary part of my journey. It fueled my determination, strengthened my resolve, and ultimately allowed me to make a deeper impact than I ever could have otherwise. It taught me the profound lesson that true worth is an internal measure, not an external validation. This experience solidified my belief that prejudice often stems from ignorance and fear, but that it can be overcome with truth, patience, and a willingness to challenge assumptions. It wasn't about proving them wrong, but about proving to myself that I could stand tall in the face of adversity. The neighborhood of El Barrio, once a place where I felt invisible, became a vibrant example of what a community can achieve when it embraces all its members. It became a place where differences were celebrated, and where everyone, regardless of their background, felt a sense of belonging. If you're watching this and feel unseen, unheard, or underestimated, remember Sofia's story. Your value isn't determined by someone else's inability to see it. Keep building, keep striving, and trust that your true worth will eventually shine through, shocking all those who doubted you. Your journey of self-worth and resilience can inspire others, just as my experience in Guadalajara inspired a whole community. Never let anyone else's narrow perception define your limitless potential. Thank you for listening to my story. Copy, download,